Prepare for a fusion of knowledge and exhilaration where education and excitement collide.
Taking you on an adventure that expands your mind and speaks to your spirit.
I'm Master Nick.
I'm Lady Dee.
We are the Dom Life.
This podcast contains sexually explicit topics and adult content.
It is intended for listeners 18 and older.
The opinions expressed in this podcast are ours alone, based on our personal thoughts, feelings, and experiences.
We understand that others may have different opinions and experiences, and we respect that. We would love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at www.thedomlife.com. Hello and welcome back.
Yay, we're always here.
Seems like we're always here. So today we're going to do an episode on rope. We've already covered a small portion and a little bit of our knowledge on rope in
The little bit of knowledge we actually have.
Yep.
Little bit.
And that was in episode 18. We decided to bring an experienced rigger on our show. So without further ado, we'd like to welcome Snapped Ginger. How are you?
Good. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, yes. We are going to be so excited to get into this episode.
Yay, especially me.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to touch rope since, I don't know, forever. It's been a little bit crazy, but we're gonna get into it today.
Yes. So we are definitely interested in learning more about you, your kinks, how you got started into it, and hopefully you can share some useful knowledge to our listeners who are interested in getting to learn rope and where they can go to find out more about rope and about you.
Yeah, we met you at the Kinktasia. You were doing the rope boot camp, and it was a pretty large crowd.
Yeah, that was a pretty big class. A lot of times the classes that I teach, especially at like a 101 level, are a little bit smaller, like 15 to 20 people, and we had 40.
And there was, it was 4 hours. 4 hours was set aside for it.
I think it was 4, yeah.
Yeah, it was educational, and it was so exciting, and I had so much fun, and now you're here in my house.
Yes.
I'm excited to be here.
I can say we have been to some not so professional rope trainings and classes and seminars. And for me, I want to learn rope, but I also don't have a whole lot of patience. So in those other classes that we have attended, the instructors are trying to get through as much as they possibly can to make it entertaining. However, you'll normally find me after the first 30 minutes, I'm sitting in a chair with my arms crossed and just people watching because they've done lost me. I've done gotten frustrated, and now I'm done.
That didn't happen this time.
That did not happen this time. But what I did do, because I know how I am, I learned the first 2 knots. And while you proceeded to go on with your class, I sat over to myself and just kept practicing those 2 knots because if I didn't practice enough, I knew I'd forget. So I wanted to leave your class with something instead of nothing. So I did walk away learning the 2 knots. But I do have to say the way you done the class, the fact that you had others there to help really made a big difference.
Because you sat them spread out
Yep.
so that we could watch them do the knots. So we weren't trying to everybody see across the room to see what you were doing with your hands.
Right. Lady
Yeah.
D, she absolutely loved it. She picked up on a lot of it and obviously came back the next day and ordered like 10,000 feet of rope.
Just a little bit, just what we need.
Yeah. When I teach like more advanced classes, the class size matters less because people kind of already know what they're doing. But when I'm teaching a 101 and when people book me to teach a 101, I tell them that I'm going to need one instructor or assistant for about every like 10 people because
Right.
I think that's what it takes to successfully help attendees who have never touched rope before actually tie along with all the things. But I absolutely love that you learned 2 ties and then went off in the corner and did your thing. Because the other thing about Rope 101 is, it can be really overwhelming, especially in a 4-hour format with like 40 people. Like that's a lot. And we went through a lot of content. Like it was kind of a 101 plus. It was a whole, it's really like 3 of my classes jammed together into a whole boot camp. And
But
it can be really
so
overwhelming.
smooth. I
It did.
mean, it
It went good.
was very educational. There was a lot about safety that we learned that unexpected. Like you're like, yeah, it's rope. I know you have to be careful, but you covered some topics in some areas that you don't consider when you know, as a beginner, I'm not even thinking that this is going to be an issue. So it was really educational and interesting. And then doing the ties was amazing.
Yes. All right. So let's get into a little bit about you. Obviously, I mean, you consider yourself kinky.
We're hoping.
But I'm really
caught
curious.
me.
I'm really curious as to what kind of kink are you into?
So I've like growing up, I was the kind of person who thought that I was a freak and I was going to be alone forever because there's nobody else like me and there's something wrong with me.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Know
And
how
then
that feels.
I found out that we have terms for this. BDSM is a thing and there's a community of people who all interact in this way. And there's a way to do it in a safer and like consensual way, and that I'm not a freak and I have very natural, normal interests.
Yay. Thank
yeah.
goodness we all found the same place in different ways.
Yeah. And when I started attending events, I was like, oh, this is it. This is home for me. This is where I belong.
Right. So what, obviously you're into rope. What other areas of, let's say, BDSM have you kind of dabbled in and what you enjoy out of it?
Yeah. Rope came later, actually. So I kind of got into it through Impact and Power Exchange and very quickly realized that I'm a masochist. And then realized even more than that, I'm very much like a sadomasochist. Like I like inflicting pain and receiving it.
Okay.
And especially in the emotional side of it. So I like when people say mean things to me.
All right.
And when I had the opportunity to experience my first rope experience, I was like, you know, I guess we'll try it. But I think I'm really more into like chains and things that are like unmovable and, you know, really restrictive. And I was really wrong because rope can be all of those things and more.
Right.
Right.
Okay. All right. So you started off with like impact. Now, did you start off as a submissive, dominant? Was you a switch? Where did you start out at?
Very much a bottom.
Okay.
Yeah, very much submissive and bottom. I was doing a lot of things with Power Exchange and a lot of things on the receiving end.
Okay. Do you still do that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
That's my, I would say that's kind of like where, like my primary role. That's kind of where I live.
Okay.
Me too. I can switch it up, but even when I do, I'm still submissive at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. You will find her as the switch, as the top going, is it okay if I hit you with this? So us true tops and dominants, we always get a good kick out of it when she's supposed to be topping and asking permission.
I can get mean. I can get mean. I know it doesn't seem like it, but you can ask Chris and he'll say she can get mean.
Yeah, you can.
I believe you.
Do you have a funny story or interesting story from your beginning experiences?
Yeah. When I first got into rope, I was only bottoming and I didn't have any interest in topping at all because
That makes me sad. I'm so glad that you changed your mind.
right. But I thought that it was too time consuming and that it would just take too long to learn and it'd be all that energy to learn something that I didn't really enjoy doing because I don't super enjoy being dominant. And so I had no interest in learning how to top. But my partner and I at the time were co-teaching rope classes in Louisville. And so he was teaching how to do the ties, and I was teaching the bottoming parts of things. I was leading discussions, talking about safety, talking about anatomy and mechanics in rope and that sort of thing. But we had so many people showing up to classes that we really needed another set of hands that knew how to tie. So he said, hey, I need you to learn these ties. And I said, no, thank you. And apparently that is not how Power Exchange works.
Nope. It does
Not
not.
at all. So I learned to top out of like necessity because I was told to, but he was not interested in bottoming for me. And we had a very monogamish relationship. So I wasn't really allowed to have other partners to bottom for me, at least for the first part. So I was self-tying out of necessity. And then I figured out that once you practice those one-on-one ties and you get really good at them and you can like teach them to other people, you can learn other ties. And then you get really good at that. And then you can start piecing things together. And then you're building harnesses. And once I learned a lock off, it was game over. And so I started self-suspending, and that has been my niche for the longest time. But people started asking me to tie them because they saw me tying myself. And then they started asking me how I was doing the things that they were seeing me do. And then so I started teaching classes, and then they wanted me to perform. And then eventually Shannon was like, hey, can you just host the rope stuff in Louisville? And I was like, I guess so.
That is awesome. Like the way that it progressed.
Yep.
It makes total sense because I've heard that from other people who tie. And when I started, when we went to the class, one of the first things you asked was, what is your role? What do you want out of the class? And I said, I want to get tied. That's all. And that's not how it ended up by the end of it. I want to tie.
Right.
I was enjoying it so much, doing the knots and figuring it out and piecing it together in my head, that it was something that I wanted to do then, which is why I have all my rope.
Yeah. And I really love starting with that question, especially at 101s. Like, what interests you about rope? Why are you here today? Because rope can be so many different things. It can be aesthetic, but it can also be sadistic. It can be something for power exchange, but it also doesn't have to be. It can be for suspension. It can be for floor. It can be sensual and sexy. Or it can just be like a platonic, like connective thing.
I don't know how much of the episode you listen to us on Kinktasia.
I listen to them.
But now that you're here, I want to tell you to your face that your performance that night at Kinktasia, you had everybody's eyes on you. Our friends Dante and Zora, they had their booth set up there. And of course, you know, he's pitching his photography studio and all this. And even he said he had to stop what he was doing to watch your performance.
You all are making me blush.
Because it was so poetic,
Right.
sensual, sexual. It was everything possible all tied together, and it left me just in awe. I was like, holy hell.
And you guys were suspended in the air together, and the movements and the way that it occurred and the way you would shift so that you would spin around was...
And blindfolded. You done half of it blindfolded.
Yeah.
I don't know what in the hell are they doing. They're not going to do. Oh shit! Look at that. You know, I mean, it was just, if I could recall every thought in my head, it was bouncing from one thing. There's no way they're going to. Oh shit! They done it. It was absolutely.
And the thing that I really love about that is Captain Leviathan and I are very close friends, and we're very flirty, but we're not actually like sexual partners. So
Right.
we're having that like extremely erotic, like hypersexual interaction without having the penetrative, you
Right.
know,
Right.
like more stereotypical version of sex. So
But it feels like it.
Yeah.
When we're watching it, it feels like you could see the connection, and
Yeah.
it was so beautiful.
we just
was.
both speak rope.
Well, and you know what? It's not just about the rope. It's your body positioning. You know how to point your leg a certain way. You know, if your toes are up towards your knee, then it looks not delicate and beautiful and attractive. But once you elongate your body and stretch out that leg, you're giving this additional sensual with your own body positioning. It was
How
And
everybody.
it's so empowering too.
How long did you all practice that?
That one, so we had experimented with pieces of that performance, just goofing off in the dungeon at bite nights and just around the place when we go to parties together. But piecing it together in that performance, we probably practiced 4 or 5 times, maybe more, piecing it all together in a performance. And then we may have procrastinated on the soundtrack and made it day of, but it's fine. It's fine. We were familiar with all the music on it, so we were able to time some of the drops and stuff to the
Right.
music that we
Well, that
definitely
was-
did not throw together minutes before we went on.
Right. No, I mean and again, I knew there was practice that had to be involved with it to know, you know, where to go and how to lean and do all this.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you could have told me you all done it for a year.
Well-
I would have, because it if you all messed up, if you all made a mistake, none of it showed. Because even if there was a mistake there, you recovered from it without giving it away.
Have you done other performances?
Yeah, Captain Leviathan and I had actually both performed that performance or a very similar version to it at Lexington Pride the month prior. And we didn't have time to scrap it and start a new performance for Kinktasia. So we were just like, we're going to do the same one. And there were some people that had been at both and had seen both versions of the performance. But we had performed that particular performance once before. I've done some self-tying performances before as well.
Do you prefer the self-tie or with a partner, or does it matter?
I think self-tying is my niche, but it depends on the experience that I want in that moment. So my favorite kind of ties to explore with right now are scenes where I'm incorporating self-ties into partnered ties. So I teach a class on tying blindfolded, and I blindfold my partner and myself, and then I tie us together. And it's very similar to some of the things that you saw on stage.
Right.
And like that right now is what is really inspirational to me and very hot and erotic and sexy and all the things.
I can only imagine. I'm sitting here only imagining. Yeah, I want to see more. Do you feel it's more complicated to self-tie and suspend or tie a partner and suspend? Which is more strenuous on you?
There are pros and cons to both. For me, I have more limited just straight up topping spoons than I do self-tying spoons. So I tend to get the headspace that I really like out of self-tying. And the other benefit of self-tying is it's a closed feedback loop. So when you tie on someone else, you have to give them the rope, put the rope on their body, and then you have to get feedback from them, whether that be watching their facial expression or asking how they're feeling or whatnot. And then make adjustments and decisions based off of like the feedback that you've gotten from the rope that you've given them.
Right.
At least that's my approach to partner ties. But when I self-tie, I'm making adjustments in the moment as I go because I'm putting the rope on myself. And so I immediately know how I'm responding to that.
Right.
So that's the biggest perk of self-tying. But then the drawback that you have to watch out for with self-tying is you're responsible for also untying. So you have to plan ahead and keep a little bit of energy in the reserves so that you have enough to come down and get yourself out. And in case of emergency, you have to have enough energy to either alert somebody so that they can help you or self-rescue if
Right.
needed.
Wow.
So I didn't even think about that.
I did not either. So one of the things that I was curious about, because when you're self-tying, it's a little bit different in the knots than when you're tying somebody else. Is that correct? Because when you're self-tying, the angles are different than when you're doing somebody else.
I don't know that the ties themselves are significantly different. I get a lot of requests to teach self-tying specific classes, and I get it. And I really value when people carve out space specifically for self-tiers. But as far as like the rope itself and the knots and hitches and frictions and all of that, there's very few modifications that I have to make to most of the harnesses that I tie. Now, obviously, things like hands behind the back are going to be a lot different and unattainable, inaccessible for most self-tiers to tie something like that. But as far as like a lot of arms-free chest harnesses, there's not a lot of modifications that I make to make it more accessible to me as a self-tyer. So the rope itself and like the technicality of it isn't much different, but you're totally right that especially when you're first getting into rope, the angles are completely different. So I tell people that I feel like I'm the most inexperienced as a top to others because, and honestly, at this point, I don't get to bottom very often. So I feel like maybe my bottoming skills are rusty too, but as a self-tyer, that's where I feel the most confident. And then even though it's the same freaking ties, when I'm putting them onto somebody else, it does feel completely different just because the angles are different, even if like the rope itself is not all that different.
Because I tried it on me because in the class it's 101 and he was doing his stuff and I was doing mine. And then I wanted to test it out because it was
the double column.
Yes. And I wanted to try it on him because I wanted to make sure that I was doing it. And it was different.
Well, then you got to look at the perception changed. It's like
instead of looking down
instead
at
of
me.
looking down and the left being on the left, now you're looking at it and what was your left is my right. So it's the perception of it. Although the knot and everything's the same, it's how you look at it on you versus looking at it on somebody else. So you've got that perception change.
So you don't get to bottom much now in rope tying? Is it a choice, or is it just because because everybody wants you to do it now?
It's a little bit of both, because I very much prioritize having the experiences that I want to have. And because I'm so busy all the time, a lot of time those experiences are going to be with people that are already established partners. And I do play with new people, and I do pick up play and things like that. But sometimes it takes a while for me to get to know someone well enough to set aside some of my very precious minutes at a dungeon party to play with somebody.
100% understand
Yep,
that.
I
We
get that.
live this world as well.
Yeah, this makes me sound like I have a huge ego, and I probably do, but at almost every party that I go to, I have more requests to tie people up than I just have time to do it. So you just have to, out of necessity, prioritize the people who are putting time and energy into you and having repeat experiences with people that you really enjoy being with. Because if you don't prioritize them, then you feel like you don't have any time with them either.
Right.
And they're your friends and your people, and I totally...
Exactly.
We are there at the same exact place.
Yep.
Because each and every time we're in the dungeon, there are a number of people waiting.
Yeah.
And at the end of the night, I'm the last person that we play with because of the drop. I get a very big sub drop after play. So we have figured out that I'm the last person. So there's a limited amount of time in the night, and people get to do it in the beginning, and then it's my turn, and then we're done.
Yep.
See, I'm the opposite. So I tend to be very high anxiety person. So self-tying really chills me out. It lets me get spacey. I feel really comfortable and confident. So it's usually the first thing that I do in the night. And then I've made my time for myself. I've done the thing that I really want to do for myself. And then anything that happens after that is a bonus. So all of my other
Right.
plans kind of come afterwards.
So what kind of mindset would you call it whenever you do self-tie? How would you relate your mindset doing rope versus the impact side of it with subspace? Is it very similar, or is it something totally different?
I think for me, self-tying feels a lot like self-care. And so I do get spacey in like a very kinky sense, like neurochemicals, like feeling high on all of those endorphins and all of that. I get that from the self-tying. I also feel a strong sense of like empowerment from doing the self-tying. In comparison, a lot of times when I'm bottoming, especially in like a power exchange or impact manner or something where I'm getting hurt, receiving pain, I feel that more as a like very submissive mindset.
Right.
And not always, and not to all people, but especially when I'm like receiving pain, like that's kind of a different headspace that sometimes overlaps with self-tying and sometimes doesn't. And I know that's really vague and probably not super helpful at all. Maybe I just have commitment issues on like, picking a term and sticking to it, but I just use the term spacey.
It's just a mindset of you're taking care of yourself. This is all about you kind of thing.
Maybe a better way to explain it is that like my normal state of my brain feels like it's in overdrive and like overproductive all of the time.
Okay.
And especially when I walk into an event, I tend to have some like social anxiety
Me
and
too.
some nerves. And I think that's
Gotcha.
really common and really really normal.
Yep.
But when I start self-tying, I get hyper focused on the sensations that I'm giving myself.
Yep.
And it's like when you put on a blindfold, and I usually self-tie blindfolded, but it helps me block out the rest of the world and just focus on the experiences and sensations that I'm giving to myself. So it feels like self-care because I'm putting my own needs and my own experiences first, and I'm very incredibly present in that moment. And I think a lot of times I live in a dissociated state. So
Me too.
yeah.
So it is very similar to subspace then.
Yeah.
Do you or have you ever got sub drop from it?
I tend to feel like a high from events for a few days. And if I drop, it's usually a few days after. Not always. It depends on what I'm doing. I know that if I'm acting in a service role outside of rope, I'm more likely to drop and drop harder. especially if I don't receive like the aftercare that I really need.
Right.
Yes.
But a lot of times it's like going back to the vanilla world, going back to my vanilla job, like, oh, I live this 24/7, like this is my thing, but sometimes I have to filter and mask a lot harder than other times, and
Right.
that's exhausting. So that's when
Okay.
I'm more likely to feel
You
that
feel like
drop.
a drop from it. Okay.
Yeah, if I
get
party,
that 100%. I get that. And it's not something I ever put together, but I get it.
I get it a lot from conventions. I get the con drop, and I joke that if you don't stop, you can't drop, but there is something in it for me because part of my like aftercare for myself after big events and especially like conventions and weekend long things is to sit down and put things on paper and put things in my calendar for future events coming up. Like, okay, finish this event. Which of my partners am I seeing next weekend? What are we going to be doing next weekend? Because that
Right.
gives me
keeps you-
something to look forward to and helps kind of come out of that like little kinky weekend bubble a little bit gentler.
Oh,
Right.
I like
Okay.
that.
Yeah.
I do. That is really good advice for people who have the same kind of issues. I
Right.
think that's a really great advice.
And I think so many people navigate the kink world in partnered pairs, which is great. I love that. But as someone who feels primarily single a lot of the time, even though I'm surrounded by partners and people that I love, it can be harder sometimes to make sure that my own needs are getting met, especially in regards to aftercare and drop.
Right.
And when you were talking about it, it did remind me of one of our friends who is single and goes through alone. You know, she messaged me one day and just said, I'm feeling out of sorts, and it's because of play that we had this weekend, and can I just lean on you today? Yep, anytime. I'm here, you know. So
Right. And that's one good thing about the kink community itself is once you find your people, they are your people through good, through bad, through hard times, through any of that. So it's always good to find your people, get out, mingle with them.
And have
And
a
lean-
whole network of support and
Yep.
community. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
So does your sadistic and sadomasochist, your masochist side of it come out in your rope play when you're the giggle already? Does that come out in your rope play when you're either self-tying or playing with others?
All of the above. Yeah. I enjoy challenging rope. So even as a self-tire, I like doing very minimalistic things. Typically, the less rope involved in a suspension, the more it's going to hurt. So the less I do. So I like the really challenging things. I like feeling physically exhausted afterwards. I like having bruises and abrasions and the mean things. I like setting myself up in predicaments and things that's going to make me challenge and sweat through the tie. And I especially love all of those things in partnered rope as well, whether it's as a bottom or a top. So when I'm bottoming, I enjoy all the same things that I do when I'm self-tying. I like the predicaments and the painful rope and minimalistic and challenging things. And
Sharp-pointed
Sharp-pointed things.
Did you see that? They're
They have the little spikes.
yeah.
with
You
the
have those,
slit
don't
in
you?
it.
I not from him, but yes, I
You
do.
have very something
Yep.
similar.
Yeah, I
There
have
is-
some of the greatest partners. One of my partners actually 3D printed some pokey things for me to hurt her with, and then she brought them to me last weekend. So yeah, have some of those. Legos are some of my favorite things. I usually have a bag in my rope bag.
Right. So you sitting here telling us the story. So I'm just going to throw out a very odd, random question. Are you ever bratty to yourself? Are you ever tying something and going, no, don't do that. It's going to hurt. Oh, you're going to take it. Do you ever have that kind of conversation? Because I would.
I'm a feisty good girl, not a brat, so maybe not. But yeah, will intentionally set myself up to be like, oh God, that's gonna suck, and then I'm smiling and giggling through the whole thing.
Have you ever seen the vampire paddles?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is my favorite implement right now, which it makes me bleed when he hits me with it. But it's one of those things that the pain receptors, by the time your brain processes it, and you've been hit with it, it's an endorphin release. Like my body loves it. It's
And I
the
honestly
best.
never thought she would even attempt and any kind of enjoyment out of it. She's actually the one that bought it. She found it and purchased it, and it came in, and she was showing it to me, and immediately I'm going, yeah, that's great. I wonder who I'm going to be able to use this on, And the first night we kind of played with it, I was real gentle. I was, and she was like, oh my God, I loved it. So I was able to amp it up a little bit. Yeah, it is. She
I
loves it.
continuously use it on other people too. So I'm I like playing behind the scenes. So when I get an implement or a toy or something, or we have one that's new, I run around, not in a dungeon setting, and I just start poking and hitting people with it, like friends, not random strangers.
Consensually, yeah.
And they're all like, they love that. So I'm like the sensory person in the background that wants everybody else to feel this sensation, whether it's good or pointy or sharp or fun. And I spend a lot of time doing that, running around doing that. So what would you say? Can you think of something sadistic with rope? Can you explain something that you would do sadistic with rope?
Yeah, in a suspension setting, if I'm doing a suspension, especially as a self-tie, I do a lot of things that are like single ankle suspensions where there's a single column on my ankle and that's what's holding my body in the air. And that's a lot of weight on an ankle.
Yeah.
So that's going to be really painful. Same thing with like around my waist, like I'll do a single column around my waist. And even if I'm involving more rope than that, it might be something where like maybe there's a chest harness and then a couple single columns on my thigh or something that puts a lot of weight on that area. I also really enjoy like positional things as well. So positions that are uncomfortable, being pulled different ways. And then
like a stretch or something? Is that what you're talking about when you're being pulled different ways?
Sure. Or compression too. Yeah. And like compressive ties, things that are just tied a little bit too tight, and then putting more body weight on them. I like all of the things.
When you come out of that, is there a longer recovery time for your body?
When I'm self-tying, I kind of work through all of this. So it might be that I come down from something painful and then I go back up in something painful in a different area. But yeah, like having bruises and abrasions and feeling that strain. For me, when I am receiving pain, I enjoy feeling like I'm on the edge of needing to tap out. And I go right up to that edge of needing to tap out and be like, oh, I don't know if I can take this any longer, and then change something about it to make it a little bit more sustainable. And I like playing right there on that edge until I finally am like done and ready to come out and work myself out. And then there's just like this sense of like relief and accomplishment and empowerment and all of the yummy like
Right.
pain feels.
Right. Okay.
There are times I understand the taking of the pain. Like there's times where I'm not able to do as much, but I will suck it up because I'm like, okay, I'm just going to absorb this. It's going to be okay. It's not like I'm getting permanently damaged. So let's absorb it. So, yeah. That's awesome.
We have seen different riggers do performances and classes, and we've noticed how different everybody's style is. Are there specific categories for the rigger side?
Yeah, I think that you can break up the tops in rope a lot like you can in an impact or really any other type. But in rope, the like two traditional boxes that we throw people in are like the Eastern style rope and Western style rope. So Eastern style rope is a lot of the like shibari style rope. It comes from Japanese prisoner of war ties, very sadistic. And in that culture, they are a very like shame-based culture. So there's this sense like of having like in traditional shibari ties, like the types of ties that you were in would signify what sort of punishment that you that you're being tied in for this. And like a lot of like traditional shibari style rope, you stay fully clothed, because the sense of being tied in of itself is exposing without actually exposing skin. And there's a whole style like kenbaku, which is like the sensual side of all of that. So connecting with your partner with the shibari ties. And then in Western style rope, a lot of Western style rope is more like circus oriented. It's a lot more like aerial athletics. It's a lot more empowering. There's a lot of like nudity and sexuality in rope. So I think where most like modern rope people kind of live is taking bits and pieces from both and finding what works for you. So like right now, and I'm like always evolving and always changing and always like finding new things that influence the way that I tie. But I think right now, what I really enjoy doing is taking the shapes and techniques and some of the ties from more like an Eastern influence background, and then combining them with the purposes of Western style. And I think you guys kind of touched on that in episode 18 too. So I think that really describes what a lot of rope that you're seeing in this region kind of reflects.
So going back to what you said, it was something that I didn't think of. So Eastern side, shibari, I do know that it kind of originated from the Japanese. But you said sadistic. I've never looked at shibari as being sadistic. I've always looked at shibari being the artistic and the I get the knots having a meaning and all that, but I always looked at it as more of an artistic side versus sadistic side. So I did
Well,
not
it
know
is
that.
artistic, but the purpose of it, I do recall reading some stuff on some of the knots and the way they all have meaning. And we talked about they
Right.
all have meaning.
All right. Well,
We
again,
actually
learned it.
had a weekend intensive about this last weekend. I'm not an expert in the history of rope, but we brought down Colin Finch from Indianapolis, who gave an intensive, and they talked about the history of rope and Hojo Jutsu and how it has evolved and how we get to like modern day goteis and how we're now adapting them and using them for different purposes on like a modern Western body, which is very different than Japanese prisoner of wars victims, you know? So they talked about how originally they used them, like these ties were used in that sort of like sadistic control setting. And then over time, people kind of rediscovered them and repurposed them for like more of a kinky, like sexual thing. But at first they were very sadistic and they were meant to inflict pain and suffering. And there's stories about rope salons where these master rope artists would tie up their bottoms and then just like sit back and have tea. And when their bottoms looked like they weren't suffering enough, they would go add a piece of rope to make it worse. And
Wow.
they would sit back and enjoy just watching this beautiful woman, stereotypically, suffer in their rope. And then as rope has evolved through the years, then people really got into like the aesthetic part of things and how it looks and how it can be really artistic and pleasing. And now people find joy in rope for all sorts of reasons.
Right.
The Japanese, they do everything in a manner that is traditional, and it all has a basis in their history, and it all has meaning. And there's a lot of stories with my family that these kind of traditions are they're just a part of their world. And in America, we're so new that the traditions were blended from all the different countries. So, yeah.
Right. Well,
And the
that's-
same thing happens in rope, I think. People find something they like, they experiment on it, they build on it, they change it. And then somebody else goes, "Ooh, I like that." And then they steal that. And then they experiment and build on it and change it. And then
Right.
somebody else learns it and it just spirals.
Right. You've already explained how you began teaching the rope classes. What's the schedule?
So I sublease L&K's venue, and we host a series of rope classes called Afraid Not events, rope events. As part of the AFK series, we have bite nights on the second Thursdays of the month from 6 to 10 p.m., and we always have a 101 at bite night. Usually it's a local rope person who's teaching it. Captain Leviathan and I teach most of them. So we always have like a 60 to 90 minute rope 101. And bite nights are a really cool event because it's really casual. It's very social. The lights are on in the space. If it's your first time, we'll give you a tour. And the interactions on the play floor at bite night have to be rope focused. So it is nudity positive, sex positive event, but that has to focus on rope. So when people get carried away with not rope, I have to come over and say, hey friend, where's the rope? And nobody wants that. So we keep it really focused on rope, and there's like a 60 to 90 minute rope 101 for the people who need it over in the corner. So you'll have 15 to 20 people taking 101, and then everybody else is playing or socializing or learning from one another. And it's a really special event. It's one of actually the most popular events all month, and it's on the second Thursdays, which always blows my mind that people are just showing up on a weekday to just hang out and do rope.
We're going to have to schedule off on a Friday.
Yep.
And then on the fourth Saturdays, we have a rope class from 4 to 6. Sometimes that's a local presenter, but we also bring in outside presenters. Sometimes I teach, but we kind of have a rotation of presenters and topics. And so we have all the things. And that's kind of geared for like beginner, intermediate level and beyond. And then we'll have rope workshops on occasion too. A few times a year, we'll do a rope workshop. So some of those include like the beginner boot camps that I do. I also have a gravity boot camp that's oriented about like suspension 101, and then a bunch of suspension classes.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. And then we also bring in presenters and do more advanced workshops too. So like the history of Hojo Jutsu and rope and goteis and hands-on, gote labbing and stuff that we did last weekend. Also on the fourth Saturdays from 8 p.m. until 1 a.m., we have a play party. So we call the play party Rope After Dark because L&K has their second Saturday party, and they have all of their normal impact furniture and whatnot on the second Saturdays. But on the fourth Saturdays, I have a floor plan that is completely different. And I bring in extra rigs, extra mats, loner rope. And so we set up the space to be a lot more rope friendly. We make space for a lot of the rope. And the impact furniture is still there, but it's moved to the side. So if you want to use it, you can pick it up and take it onto a carpet, but then move it back. That way it can still be a fourth space for rope if people want it to to be. So it's like a normal party, just with a special accommodation.
Are you doing
for
that
rope.
in November?
Yep, sure I am. Yep.
Now, is there anything people need, not only for us, but our listeners that may be interested? What do they need prior to coming? They just need to
Have rope?
Find out where it's at and show up. Is there a cover charge? Should they bring rope? What would they need?
Before you show up at the door, you have to have bought a ticket online. So, and I post the ticket links out on FetLife, on Instagram. They're up on the L&K Discord. Sometimes they even make it to the L&K Facebook. So you have to have a ticket, and then you have to have your ID to check in at the door. So ticket and ID at the door, but then everything else, you can show up without bringing anything else. So I have a basket of loner rope and loner shears that we lend out to people who need them at classes. At a bite night for 101, you absolutely don't have to have anything. Although if they already have their own rope, they're more than welcome to bring it. And then at the classes, it depends on who's teaching and what they set the prereqs as. So sometimes you have to have like rope 101 knowledge and skills, but sometimes it's more than that, and sometimes it's less. It just kind of depends. So all of that information is posted on the event description.
And that's at L&K's website, which is...
No.
Where's that posted at?
My ticket platforming, because since I sublease, I run all the tickets myself. So my ticketing platform right now is on Humanitix. Yeah. And I think you can find me on there at Snap Ginger LLC. I think if you look that up on Humanitix,
so
you'll find it.
What we will do for this episode, Dan, we'll make sure we have all that information. All that information will be posted on our website. So if you're listening and interested and confused, feel free to check out the website. Feel free to reach out to us. And also, you did mention FetLife. Mm-hmm. You are snapped ginger.
Past tense, already snapped. Too late to be unsnapped.
Yep. I like that. And I was hoping you would say that because you mentioned that at boot camp. And I was like, she's got that down to a T now. So we got Snap Ginger at FetLife. If you're interested in rope or any of the classes, reach out to her there.
And then on Instagram, it's SnappedGinger09. Just to keep things complicated.
Well, yeah, you've got to. I don't think I'm following you on Instagram, so I will have to find you.
Let's be friends.
All right. I know at your I know at your boot camp, I think the word was rope depot.
Dom Depot.
Dom Depot.
Dom Depot.
So believe it or
He
not,
literally was like, "Where is
there
Dom
is
Depot?"
there is a Dom Depot, but they do not sell rope. Just
He
so you
kept
know.
saying, like,
I was
"Where's
so mad.
Dom
I was so mad.
Depot?"
I'm sitting back here on my phone going, where the hell is this damn place they're talking about? I can't
said,
find it.
She meant Home Depot, but Dom Depot.
I think sometimes I have some narrow, spicy, dry humor, so I'm glad that someone else took it seriously. Though.
Yeah, I did. I Googled it. It does exist. Make sure and stick around for next week's part 2.
With Snap Ginger, where she gets deeply into rope, suspension, and all the details. Please follow, like, and share our podcast.
Make sure to visit thedomlife.com, where you can find pictures and other details about the Dom Life podcast. And through the Contact Us button, you can ask questions or provide recommendations for future episodes.
We want to explore your kink too.
Be sure to check out upcoming events to see where our adventures are taking us and our photo gallery to where we've been.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you had fun listening and learning with us.
Till next time, keep calm and remember your safe word.
Red, red, red.